Welcome to the Biz Coach Show, brought to you by My Biz Coaches. Our show is focused on giving entrepreneurs the edge they need to succeed. Learn more at mybizcoaches.com. Your host is Eric Whitmoyer, owner of My Biz Coaches. Eric is a business coach, serial entrepreneur, author, and speaker. Eric is passionate about sharing his knowledge and insights with small business owners so they can transform their businesses and achieve peak success. Learn more at mybizcoaches.com. Well, Eric, it is always great to hang out with you. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. I realize that it's been a while since it's just been you and me on the show.
I know, right? Well, hopefully it's still entertaining and informative for our audience. I'm sure it will, knowing the topic that we're covering today. But yeah, great to hang out with you. Hopefully your day's going good.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it.
Awesome. Sounds good. Well, I think we'll just dive right into it, man. I think this is something that you and I have been wanting to talk about on the show for a while. It seems to kind of pop up over and over again as I know particularly you're working with clients, and this is something that I focus on as well, is people have this, kind of ownership mentality around their business, but that doesn't always translate into, great people skills, great leadership skills, and that can really be a detriment to their business. So today we're talking about mastering business leadership beyond ownership. And I'd love to just kind of start by getting your thoughts a little bit, Eric, on what differentiates a business owner from a leader in the context of managing a company.
Yeah, good question. I would start with, I recently did a post on LinkedIn a couple weeks ago. I piggybacked on somebody else's message, but they were talking about the difference between management and leadership, specifically being a manager versus being a leader. And I really honestly think it's pretty much the same analogy in the sense of, because you're the business owner doesn't mean you're an effective leader. And one of the pretty significant opportunities is understanding the difference between the two, right? And it was funny because as I read the comments, I felt compelled to share my thoughts on that article, because as I read the comments, people were like, "Oh, I see this all the time. A manager and a leader, they're the same thing." And I'm like, "No, they're not." Sorry. So I felt compelled to share my 2 cents, and there were a lot of people that weighed in on it. But my point being, in regards to getting to your question, is there are lots of managers, people who are task-oriented individuals who are responsible for getting something accomplished. But a leader is somebody who gathers the group, creates a vision, it leads them to the end goal, whatever that is, but does so in a way that's empowering and developing and engaging and just does it in a way that just makes everybody around them better, right? And a true leader knows how to leverage the skill sets of the people around them, but also how to get the most out of them. A manager's not really focused on that. There's no clear delineation between a manager and a leader. And I'm using manager in the same context as I was referencing an owner. A lot of owners are convinced that this is my business, you should do this because I'm the owner. And the reality is that is not the world we live in today. That might have worked 40, 50 years ago, but that doesn't work today.
Right.
I don't care how big the company is or how small the company is. At the end of the day, there are lots of options for people to go work somewhere else. And a lot of people are opting out. We talked about this in many shows ago when we talked about the Great Resignation, right?
Yep.
People are choosing to opt out of companies that don't recognize them and their potential and the opportunities and what's fulfilling for them. And that's a direct reflection of poor leadership. When the leadership, the ownership, when the owners of the company are the key people responsible for leading the organization, don't recognize what's valuable to their employees and what their employees are looking for, and don't help them understand how what is important to them ties back into the success of the company and how the two are interrelated, that's not good leadership. That's just, right. That's a huge miss, right? And, you and I have had many, many conversations, the difference between a good leader, an effective leader, and a manager. There's a lot of tough things that going into an effective leader. But I think the biggest thing is just draw the line between a manager and a leader And I say that if you're saying that you're an owner and you're not calling yourself a leader of your organization, then you likely don't completely understand the differentiation of the two.
Yeah.
I would not want to be, I mean, being labeled as an owner of a company. I actually, even myself personally, currently today, I prefer to be called the founder and CEO. Because I think the term, the title CEO, the term founder, yes, I started the company, but they're not all my great ideas. It's not all about what I'm capable of doing. I build it with the context of being able to incorporate other people like yourself and others on our team that are very capable, very valuable people that have great insights and great ideas and are helping the company grow over time. Somebody who's your traditional business owner has that. I believe that they're caught up on the idea of I'm the owner.
Yeah.
I'm the owner. Do as I say, not as I do. Do it because I said so. None of that works in today's world, in the employment space. And I think that that's the real disconnect, really. I mean, a good leader, and I know we're going to talk about it more in some of these other topics, but a good leader really knows how to pull the best out of the people that they manage.
Yeah. And
so management is a component of leadership. But leadership is like, in my eyes, the way I see it, leadership is like that's management on steroids, really.
Yeah.
Ownership is, and being a business owner, you have to take it to the next level.
Yeah. Yeah. It's an interesting concept too. In your founder example, it's almost like if you're leading effectively, your team will help the business outgrow the original vision, right? Bigger than you ever thought, if you're doing things correctly versus trying to control everything and control the creativity. So I think it's a really important and interesting point you bring up.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I would use two key things to illustrate that. The first one would be the two books. Sorry, the first one was The E-Myth by Michael Gerber, and one of the things he very clearly identified, in effect, what constitute a business. If you have a business versus have a job, and you have a business when you have something that you could literally, you've empowered other people to run the day-to-day operations, and you can walk away from the business and come back a year later and it's as good or better than when you left it. That's when you have a business versus a job, right? And consequently, if you're a leader, your team can operate without you there, and they can get the job done as good or better than when you were there.
Yeah.
That's when you know you're a leader. And I kind of draw that conclusion, and I pulled that from the E-Myth, and then also from the book that we read, which was Built to Last.
Yep.
And it talked very specifically about some of the key things that made companies sustain over 50 years. And one of the main chapters was about leadership specifically, and it said you can't have a charismatic leader. If they care, so they couldn't. The leader couldn't be so charismatic that they trump the business.
Yeah.
Right. Because if the leader is so charismatic that they're the business, then again, you don't have a business. You have somebody who's the face of the company, is the only face of the company, and it won't sustain when that charismatic leader has moved on.
Yeah. Which is so important, right? Because now with social media, sometimes the leader is more recognizable than the brand, right? And basically all you have is a monetized personality, which is really risky for a business.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's, I would actually go back to T-Mobile and I'd look at John Leisure.
Yeah.
Right?
Great example.
Yeah. He was very much the face of T-Mobile during that transition and the period of time that they went through and the growth that they had. And we saw it firsthand, right? In our relationship with T-Mobile. But what was interesting is what has happened is that it has sustained their position in the marketplace for the most part. I don't think that they've really lost any momentum relative to the other carriers out there. They really kind of maintained and sustained their position because they had a good transition in leadership. Right. Different personality, different person, not the same flamboyant outgoing John Leisure, right? But still having the same type of success. So, recognizing what was necessary at the time, and at that point, John Leisure was the right guy for the job to do what they needed to do. Right.
Absolutely.
That's representative of leadership in my eyes.
Yeah. Yeah. Good example. Well, that's a good illustration or example, right? Any other examples that you could use to help illustrate the importance of being a people leader in addition to being a business owner?
Yeah. So I think that the important distinction, again, as a leader, and I kind of referenced it, but I'll more specific, is people who are good leaders know how to make other good leaders. That's probably the most empowering distinction that I can think of. That's the way I envision it. If I am a good leader, for me to consider myself an effective leader, I need to be able to create other leaders,
right,
as good or better than me. And when I first years ago, when I was first got into sales leadership, the first thing I began to pay attention to was, are the people that are getting trained by me coming out and having success in sales? Are they having as much success or better, having better success than I had? So, and what percentage of those people are having success?
right.
And if it was consistently 60, 70, percent of the people are coming out and having success, then I'm leading well, right? Because they're coming out not only being successful in sales, but in addition to that, many of them are now moving up in the ranks and becoming more influential people within the organization. And they're continuing to spread that knowledge and that understanding and that skill set and whatever it was, right? So in the beginning, it was with sales. Later, it became management. It's like, as you get into management, how do I train people how to be better leaders? Well, can I effectively share my vision? When I share the vision of where I want to go with my company, with my team, with my organization, whatever it is, do my people get it? Do they see where I'm going? And more importantly, are they behind me?
Yeah.
Right. Are they like, yeah, well, let's go there, boss? And they're, it's not like they're waiting for me to even lead the charge. In many cases, they're out in front of me. They get it. They know where we're going, and they're out there leading the charge. I think that's a big component of that. In addition to that, I think that so it's about building other people to be other leaders, right? And there's a lot that goes into that. Delegation is a big factor, right? How well do I delegate to my team? One of the biggest misses that I see for business owners is they are terrible delegators.
Yeah.
Right. That is by far and away one of the things that I see on a regular basis. And I know for a fact that's a big tripping factor for many people. And I've thought about this a lot over the last couple of years. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that your average business owner did not work for a larger organization that had a lot of resources where they developed them through training classes and personal development courses and whatever else it was necessary to help them train and become like the stuff that you and I did for ourselves, beyond what the company did. The company did some stuff for us, but then we went beyond that and we invested in ourselves. And, you got your certifications and I got certifications and we did all those other things to continue to improve on our skill sets. Most people don't do that.
Right.
Most people won't make the time to do it, quite honestly. And that the challenge becomes is that at some point, as well as you might know your job, as well as you as a business owner, right? You take your average service-based business owner gets into a business, they know what they're doing really well, but why they struggle is because they're not continuing to invest in themselves to become better. And what got you here won't get you there. So what got the business off the ground and got their first couple $100,000 in revenue annually coming in isn't going to get them to the next level because they've got to be able to spread themselves. And you can't do that if you're not teaching people how to do that.
Right.
Yep. Right. So you're constantly trying to find mini-me's, for lack of a better description, right? You're trying to find mini-me's who can do what you do and theoretically do it even better, right? Yeah. Because they have different skill sets than you do and can come in from a different angle and have a different perspective. And that's another thing, right? Enhancing other perspectives. You're enhancing the business through other perspectives, right? Yeah. Having different people with different mindsets, different backgrounds. That's an effective leader knows how to aggregate that and bring that together in an effective way so that you can move forward and capitalize on these different ideas and concepts, as opposed to, throttling them and pushing it back and say, well, that's not how we do things here.
Yeah, totally.
So I think those are a couple of examples I think that are really important that kind of illustrate the difference between somebody who's building people up versus, just kind of focusing on a particular task or function.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think just to add to that, I think one of the things we'll see increasingly, you have these, tech entrepreneurs that are maybe technically brilliant, right? They get the software, everything else, but their emotional intelligence is sorely lacking, right? And so I think that as, more and more businesses get founded, especially in the IT space, that's really an opportunity, for people to recognize, hey, there's a opportunity here to grow my leadership skill set if I want to, grow beyond my startup stage, initial funding, right? All those sorts of things. You really have to invest in your people to make that business work. So I think that's something that's going to become increasingly important with the types of businesses that are being founded today.
And I would add a piece to that, David. It's not just investing in their people; it's investing in themselves first.
Yeah, for
right?
sure.
Yeah, and then investing, because I think that's the disconnect. Because if I invest in my people, but I don't know exactly what I want them to learn from the investment, then I don't have any basis to draw on to say, yeah, that was valuable or it wasn't valuable.
Yeah.
But if I invest in myself and I know what I got from it, right? And now when I introduce it to my organization and I say, this is what I'm expecting to get from this. And if you've got a 60, 70% breakthrough ratio, conversion ratio, whatever you want to call it, then I've been successful.
Yeah.
But if I just, like, for instance, if I'm the owner of a company and I say, I'm going to have everybody do a sales training.
Yeah.
If I didn't go through it myself, which, by the way, is something that a poor, a business owner might do that a leader would not do. The leader would go through it with them. But a lot of people, manager owner kind of mentality, they're going to be like, nah, you guys go through this and then we're going to have better sales.
Yeah.
Not necessarily, right?
Yeah.
But
if, great example.
Yeah, as a leader, if I go through it with my people, I know what context I went through it either before they did, or I go through it with them, and I can help influence the value of it. I can help influence the absorption rate, that how well they're taking it in. I can see whether or not they're growing from it and learning from it, and they're getting the value out of it that I wanted them to get from it. Then there's a lot more to it than that. But when you just kind of assign it as a task, like a manager would do,
right,
there is a huge gap, right? And you can't really quantify whether or not you got any value out of it. And this is why many companies won't spend the money on the development, because they don't know what they're paying for.
Right.
They can't appreciate what they're paying for.
Yeah. And you brought up an interesting point too, Eric, that I think is important, is if you're spending time or money, having your people grow and develop, but you're not developing yourself, what ends up happening is either they don't grow past you, or they do and they realize, hey, I can't learn anything from this guy anymore, and I'm going to go somewhere else with all of the skills that they've imparted into me, go start my own business or go make more money somewhere else. And now you start losing good talent. So you have to grow at least at the same rate, if not faster, than the people around you.
So one of the main reasons that I invest is and I spent tens of thousands of dollars on personal development over the year, right?
Yeah, at least.
Yes, exactly. It's probably a six-figure number in there. Yeah, absolutely. But the point is that the reason I did that is I recognize that at some point, if I stop growing, I have nothing else to provide to my group.
Yeah.
Whatever team I'm responsible for, whoever it is I'm leading, I have nothing else to provide them if I'm not constantly challenging myself and pushing the envelope and figuring out what's going to make me better. And it doesn't have to be, I've made this reference many times, but when we were at our last company, one of the things I did is I introduced what the Jack Canfield promoted as the success principles. Yep. And there were 67 of them. I took 20 of them that were most business related, even though it was personal development growth. I took the 20 that were most related to business. I incorporated it into our organization, and I hammered it. I mean, that was a key component of everything we talked about for many months before it started paying dividends. And then when it started to pay dividends, we were crushing everybody. And a lot of it had to do with the fact that I stopped talking about sales.
Yeah.
Right. And I started talking about making better leaders.
Yeah.
And that had more to do with the fact that there was 19 sales directors that had operated and worked for me than out of the 27. There was 19 of the 27. That was because I taught people how to be better leaders, not because I taught better salespeople.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, it's an interesting point too, not to go on a tangent, but leadership's messy, right? And I think that's why people avoid it sometimes. Is it's like, it's easier to manage because leadership gets messy and it blurs the line sometimes between, personal and professional, and people don't always like that. But I think that, to your point, when you focused on those things that were applicable in business, but also in life, and people start to apply that, whether that's your business culture or the things that you're teaching, or even by your example, right? That can be powerful too. Those people are more likely to follow you, especially in those difficult times, because the impact you've had in and outside the business. So I think that's an important distinction you draw there.
Yeah, great point. And it was funny because I know I've shared this story with you before, but there was a time when our COO came up to me and said, we had a difficult conversation. I was not excited about the circumstances that we were in currently. Yeah. And for myself personally, as I felt like my growth might have been stunted a little bit, and I was a little frustrated. And I was sharing something with him, and it was actually about sharing the kudos of who had built, I had built the market, but the current director that was running the market was getting all the credit for it. Right. And it was a bit of a rub. I mean, I was mature enough to realize, no, they're doing a lot of work and they certainly deserve it. But, having been the person that built the market to begin with, I'm kind of like, yeah, it was the bones that I put out there. I was like, it was a little, selfish, but what I was going through a period, right? Sales development, there's a process in sales that you move from being the salesperson to the sales manager. And when you do that, you have to learn how to basically live vicariously through your team.
Yeah.
And I was working through that process, and I was getting further and further up the executive ladder. And what was happening was it was being more and more removed from the high, for lack of a better term. The jack is what he called it, that I would get from closing a deal or, getting the top sales producer awards or whatever that was. Yeah. And I needed to get my high from somewhere else.
Yeah.
And that actually came to me probably 6 months, a year later, I want to say. And it was when I started having people who, like yourself, much younger, starting to have, really good, not just business success, but having things in their life evolve, right? Hey, I'm getting married. I'm having kids. I bought my first home. I'm now making a 6-figure income. Yeah. All these things are happening 3, 4, 5, 6 years after working under your tutelage. Boss, thank you for that. That was amazing. I really appreciate it. I'm where I am because of you. And I'm like, no, you did the work. I just pointed you in the right direction. But my point is that was more valuable to me than the sales awards.
Yeah. Right.
It was a transition.
Yeah.
It certainly was a transition. I didn't feel like that right out of the
Yeah.
But over time, that was more gratifying and more fulfilling. And quite honestly, as I look back over my career, I will tell you that by far, those are the things I look back on that I really reflect on. I'm like, that's amazing. That makes me feel awesome.
Yeah. And I hope that resonates with entrepreneurs that are, listening or watching this, because while you're building a business, you're also, building a team, and you're, influencing people's lives. You're influencing a community around you. And those things are, profit's important. Don't get us wrong. Eric and I are all about that. But there's other things that are, as important and maybe more personally gratifying than just growing the business and increasing your bottom line year over year.
Yeah. I'll actually add a piece to that. Key reasons why business owners have a hard time selling. Attachment to the people.
Yeah. Yep.
Attachment to the community, attachment to the people. I want to make sure that whoever buys my business will sustain with the same concepts and ideologies that I had building my business. And I want them to, I want my community to continue to, appreciate the business that we build and everything like that. And so to your point, businesses sustain for extended periods of time. It's not uncommon for that to be a disruption in the sales process of selling the business, because they're connected to those people. They're connected to that community. They're connected to people who are, part of that growth in that organization. So it does exist, to your point.
Yeah.
We just need more business owners to look at it that way, I think.
Yeah. And then groom a successor so you can feel comfortable stepping away when it's time to exit.
Exactly.
Right? So awesome. Well, cool. Well, let's kind of move on a little bit. I think one thing that is interesting, and I'm sure you've seen this as you worked with your coaching clients, is a lot of entrepreneurs start as solopreneurs. And as the business grows and they start bringing people in, they really struggle with that transition that we keep talking about between the owner mindset and the leadership mindset. So I'm curious, kind of have you seen that, and what's the impact of that struggle to shift from that solopreneur to now I have a business and a team and I'm trying to make this thing work?
Yeah. So ironically, I literally just came from a lunch meeting and I had a conversation with a gentleman who had a relatively successful roofing business for an extended, was in the industry for quite a few years, 20 plus years, I think it was, and had a difficult end to that time in that space. Didn't end well for him. And he had owned that one of the biggest problems that he had in that role was he was not good at delegating. Was not good at delegating and actually struggled immensely with saying yes all the time.
Yeah.
Didn't say no often enough and consequently gave away more than he should have, in different scenarios or tolerated more than he should have. And I think that those are, as a solopreneur, starting up that company and making it through that transition, there's so much energy that goes through getting from point A to point B, getting from the first dollar to the first $20,000 month, and then, at $20,000, you could probably afford to bring on 1 or 2 employees, right? Or, depending on your business model, where you're at, but, now you've got 1 or 2 people working for you, and nobody stops you and says, hey, by the way, you should probably take a class on leadership.
Right.
You should probably take a class on interpersonal relationships. You should probably take, it's like, and nothing prepares you for all the trials and tribulations that you're going to deal with. So what happens is you're learning as you're going through the business. Well, your employees are often learning a lot of this with you.
Yeah.
And if you don't know how to position yourself, you don't know how to, lead with confidence, even though you may not be 100% confident all the time. Consequently, you're going to have your employees look at you and go, this guy doesn't know what the hell he's doing.
Yep.
He's just figuring this out as he goes. And it's what's funny is if you look at a lot of service-based businesses, what you'll find is employees will leave the owner and go start their own business because they're like, I can do this better.
Yeah.
And I would venture to say that if the first owner had better leadership skills, had either invested in or at least had previous knowledge to what it takes to be a good leader, they likely would not have struggled as much because they would have had people supportive of them, even though they knew that they were still trying to figure this out. The employees would have been supportive of them and said, no, they're trying to figure it out, but they're doing the right things. And I'm here for the long haul. I'm here for the duration because they believe in me. They trust me. They want me to be successful as well. Right.
Right.
But in those competitive environments where you see people run off, it's like, well, it's because the guy doesn't know what he's doing. I know I could do it better. Right. And everybody who's good believes that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but I think that's one of the big things is that, they're afraid to delegate because they don't want people to know what they don't know. They don't want people to know that they don't know. Right.
Right.
So they try and hide behind that. I think that being transparent, there's a lot of value in to be a leader, to being transparent about setbacks, about disappointments, about frustrations, and being clear with people. I think, communication is a huge factor. Most people are not good communicators, and consequently, because they're really good at what they do, they struggle with slowing down, taking the time to explain something to somebody and help them make that transition, become a good subordinate and help them be successful. There's so much that can go into that, not knowing who to look for, not knowing the type of person to hire, right? We talked about hiring on here many times. What's a good hire look like for you and your personality?
Yeah.
Right. What would gel better with your personality, and then as you grow and scale, are you looking at, instead of getting a whole bunch of mini me's, for lack of a better description than I used earlier, because a mini me is great at one point, but then you have to bring in other perspectives. And if you don't, then you're lacking. You're not well-rounded. You're kind of, get all out of congruency. And consequently, you don't have, instead of having a wheel, you've got like an oblong and it doesn't roll because,
Yeah. No,
so I think, go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, I was just going to say, and you bring up a good point too, because as you're looking to grow leaders within your organization, you need different leaders at different times, right? And so you always have to evaluate, what does the business need now? And it may change over time. But speaking of time, you alluded to something that I think maybe we should unpack a little bit, which is, you're growing the business, you're trying to, manage this team, you're not leading the team just yet. You're trying to work with, clients and everything else that comes with it. But you don't always prioritize that skill development. And I know that's something that you talk about a lot, right? One of your expertise is time management. And I know that you've done a lot of work on that, but it's not something that you're just going to stumble into great leadership. You have to be intentional about making time to do that. So I'd love to maybe get some of your thoughts on that.
Yeah. Even like, as we referenced earlier, the idea that I recognized I got to get better at certain things. The only way in my busy schedule for me to actually make sure that I have time for those things is to carve them out and commit to them and say, I'm going to do this every Monday for 2 hours or whatever that looks like. Right. If you're not committing to and recognizing, hey, there's these things that I need to work on and I need to incorporate that into my schedule, it'll never happen. It'll never get done.
Yep.
Right. And so when I wrote the book on goal setting, it's funny because I reflected on that book for quite a few years before I actually wrote it. And as you remember, but it was I kept coming back to what made me good at it is I was always reflecting on my goals.
Yeah.
I didn't just do it once and then come back a year later. I was constantly evaluating how much more am I improving? How much better am I getting? I would guarantee you that if you asked my old boss, our COO, if you had asked him, what was one thing that Eric did on a regular basis, I always asked, how am I doing?
Yeah.
What can I do to get better? How am I doing in your eyes? How am I doing? And what can I do to get better? And I wasn't thinking about metrics when I asked that question. I was thinking about how do I get better? How can I improve in my skill sets? But it was because I had a conscious effort of committing to doing that and putting that into my calendar, putting it into my, even my goals, right? I want to get better at this particular area of my life. And then how do I do that? I mean, even you mentioning the fact that, I spent a lot of time on goal setting, or not goal setting, but time management. The reason I did that is because I struggled with managing my time.
Yeah.
So I continue to read more books and look at more information and assess that. And then, okay, now how do I incorporate that into my life? I think that's the problem is a lot of people have a tendency to review information. They don't actually act on it. And that's where the gap is. Yeah.
No, those are great tips. And I think just your example about your own intentionality in making it a priority and scheduling it, I think is important for somebody that's in that transition because it's chaos, right? You're being pulled 1,000 different directions
every day.
And you're not just going to suddenly wake up tomorrow, an amazing leader. You have to prioritize it and work at it, right? It'd be cool if you could. Yeah. I mean, if we could figure that out, Eric, we'd be gajillionaires. But
well, it's we saw it happen in the Matrix, right?
Okay, you're right. Outside of the Matrix, it's not possible.
I figured you'd appreciate that reference.
Yes, absolutely. But cool. Well, we keep talking about leadership, and you've given a couple of inferences to what you believe to be kind of important attributes for a leader in a small business. So you've talked about communication, you've talked about delegation. What are maybe a couple other things that come to mind for you when it comes to important leadership skills or attributes that somebody needs to have?
So I mentioned it, but goal setting is another big one. Defining what's your vision, where are we going? And I say goal setting, it sounds really generic, but more specifically, what's the vision for the company?
Yeah.
Where do we want to go next week, next month, next year, 10 years from now? What does that look like? What's our vision? And then be able to paint that picture for people. I think that's a sign of a phenomenal leader, is not only having the vision clear in your head, but more importantly, I can paint the picture for everybody else to envision. And then I can show them where they fit in that picture. What role they play in that, right? And then the value that they gain from that, they're going to extract from playing that role in that organization. That is a key. That's a leader. And it's funny, is I've read lots of books on good leaders. I read the biography on Steve Jobs, and I've got some strong thoughts about Steve, and I certainly know when he was younger, he was not a good leader. He was a terrible leader, but there were things that he did really well. He knew how to get the most out of somebody. Yeah. Probably, absolutely to the point of being almost negative, right? Because it was like he was wringing them out of any what he thought was value. But the point is, there's some good things about that, and I think I'll probably get off topic for a second, but I got to explain this because I think one of the things that people get caught up on when they think about a leader who's trying to really push somebody, think about think about a drill sergeant, or in the Marines, a drill instructor. Right? You think about those roles. They're pushing you, and you as the person receiving all that guidance in that direction, right? And they're hard on you, and so hard on you that you're just like, this is not human. This is not, this is not how it should be. This is because they're preparing you for some of the most challenging experiences you could possibly ever experience.
Yeah.
As a human being, right? So, you could potentially watch the person next to you die, right? And you have to be able to press through that in that scenario. And so they have to be able to push you to that level to get you to come out and really recognize your potential. I could get really geeky and go into the whole Deadpool, right? we're gonna make your mutant things come out, right? But my point is, you have to keep pushing to find that level. And I think that there's, not to get into all societal things and everything like that, but there's this general tendency to not push so hard because it's not fair, because it's hard, because it's this. And, the reality about being an owner, man, there is nothing easy about being a business owner.
Right.
If it's hard to be a leader, it's even harder to be a leader of your own business.
Right. Yep.
Right. It's hard to be a good, effective leader in any organization. I don't care what you do. It's a 10x, maybe 100x harder to do that in your own business, because it's not just me developing people that are going to help me run my organization, but it's also, I have all the risk. This is my money. Yeah. This is my livelihood. I likely borrowed from people, friends and family, or, against my own home to start this business. I've got so much on the line, and I get so frustrated if people aren't supportive of what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
So imagine all the stress and anxiety that comes with that. I mean, honestly, whatever you could potentially do to somebody in an entrepreneur boot camp couldn't be enough to prepare somebody to be a business owner in my eyes.
Sure.
Let alone a good business owner.
Yeah.
A good leader of a business. So I share that to say that the reality is there's tons of things that could be done. Vision, communication, two major contributors, because how I paint that picture and I help you see where you fit, and how I communicate with you and help you see that value is imperative, right? Yeah. And then how do I delegate? Well, I've got to be able to show you what I need you to do and show you in a way that you're going to remember, and then you see the importance of why that's. I mean, there's so much that goes into that whole point.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think those are probably three of the big. We can get into time management. You can get some of the other things, but creating the vision, showing you where you fit in that vision, and helping reinforce you understand where you fit and the role that you play and how important that is, and why it's important to me and why it should be important to you. Those are probably some of the biggest things. The tactical things of whatever job or task you do, whether you install turf or replace plumbing, or fix plumbing, or replace HVAC units, or whatever, none of that is nearly as important.
Yeah,
is in developing the people that are going to help you run that company and be able to sustain through those difficult challenges that you're going to struggle through.
Yeah, it's I think what you're touching on is super important, Eric. And I think kind of two things come to mind as you say that. One is, if you look at the data, on millennials and now Gen Z in the workplace, one of the things they consistently prioritize as, an element of their work that they find critically important is meaningful work, right? What am I contributing to, right? And if I don't feel like I'm contributing, doesn't matter, it's not meaningful, they'll go somewhere else. And so I think what you're talking about by helping them see where they fit in the vision is critical. And then I think it's, I'm thinking about Simon Sinek and kind of his, work on why and all that. But he talks about, your culture is so much more than what you do. It's almost like, this is who we are. This is what we're about. This is how we treat each other, how we treat others. Oh, and by the way, we sell this product, right? It's almost that's the afterthought, because the leaders built such a strong vision and culture within that company. So I just think, everything you're saying is just resonating with me for sure.
Yeah. And think about this. I mean, if you might remember, what my team within that previous organization, we had T-shirts.
Yes, I do.
Right. We are Express Locations. I am Southwest.
Yeah.
Right. It's it's like I'm a subset within this organization. I identify with this organization, but I am this subset, and this subset is even better.
Yeah.
Think about what goes into the psychology of that. if people truly bought into that ideology that not only am I of this organization, which is a really powerful and strong, great organization, but in addition to that, I'm the subset that's even better.
Yeah.
And it's not being arrogant. It's just being confident. And imagine what that does for people in their lives in general, it's beyond your job, right?
Well, it creates such a strong sense of belonging that you're not going to get everywhere you go, right? And again, that becomes important in a small business because it becomes something that helps with retention, right? And employee engagement, all those other things.
Yeah. And so I'll go back to the jobs reference again. Ask somebody that works at Apple why they work at Apple. Right? I guarantee you there's a lot to be said about the legacy of Apple, who Steve Jobs was, who the influential people were in that organization that made that company who it is today.
Yeah.
But they're Appleites.
Yeah.
Right? Just like Nordy's over at Nordstrom's, just like, people who are hardcore Microsoft, it's like that there's something in the water that they're all drinking and they all buy into. And you got to say, when you look at a company that's been around 40, 50, 60 years and through all the challenges they've been 40, 50 anyway, but been through the challenges that they've been through and the transitions that they've been through, that speaks to it. There's something in the idea of me having that association with that organization. They believe in what they're doing and they believe in the role they play within that organization, regardless of where they are in the organization.
Yeah. Well, I know we could rabbit hole this too, but I think what you also touch on is when you do that so well, your customers or your clients, they want to be associated with you because then they're associated with that amazing culture, right? And now it becomes a whole new sales, marketing, branding approach that you can't even achieve if you don't have strong leadership.
Phenomenal. I mean, think about for 5 years as a dealer for T-Mobile, we couldn't sell the iPhone.
Right.
How many people came into our stores with an iPhone 3 and we're showing them a new Samsung phone, which is just crushes the Apple at that point, right? At that when Apple wasn't as innovative, right? And you're like, why would you not want this one? Oh, because I need an Apple.
Yeah.
I mean, there were comics. There were comics that said, I have to have the Apple. I have to. They were so, to your point, so loyal to the brand for whatever reason, whatever they connected with, whatever they associated with. They didn't even make logical purchasing decisions. Yeah. Right. And in someone else's eyes, to be fair to them.
Right. Yeah, totally. As an Android user, I would agree. So I love it. I love it. Well, that's a lot of good stuff. And I think we actually kind of covered the next point we wanted to touch on, which was how the owner's approach to leadership influences culture and success. So unless you have anything else on that one, we can kind of move on to the next topic.
No, I think we beat that one up pretty good.
Yeah, I figured. So, okay. Well, there's a couple of things that we haven't quite touched on. One is, so going back to kind of leadership skills specifically. So kind of getting a little bit more tactical here. When the business owner struggles with conflict management, when they struggle with empathy, when they struggle with, delegation, how does that hinder the company's ability to grow?
Yeah, it's massive. I mean, there's no other way to say it. It's massive. My guess. So first of all, you've heard me say this statistic before, but 91% of all small businesses never reach $1 million in gross revenue on an annualized basis. Yeah, that's 91% of 32 million small businesses out there. 32 million businesses. 91%. They're small business or not. 32 million businesses. 91% never achieve $1 million in gross revenue. When you look at it from that perspective, that in and of itself tells you a lot about the gap between being able to, start your business and move to some level. Now, that doesn't mean you have to be $1 million business to be considered successful. It just says that the growth, the capability of growing to a certain level is stunted, and it's a direct correlation to somebody's ability to lead, to delegate, to challenge people when things aren't right, to manage conflict, as you referenced. I mean, I heard you. I made the reference earlier. You asked me about the person I met with at lunch. He said I couldn't say no. Yeah. If you can't say no in the right circumstances, you're going to fail. I don't care who you are or what you do. The profit margins would have to be so astronomically high for you to be able to make. Because, and I said to him, one of the things you have to remember in business is you only have to be right about 60, 65% of the time. Yeah. You can't be 50-50 because you never grow. And you certainly can't be less than 50 because then you're regressing. But if you're right 60 to 65% of the time, say 2/3 of the time, it's still striking out, 33% of the time, 37, 35% of the time, right? But if you can just get it right 60, 65% of the time, you're going to have a pretty successful business. And the key there is to recognize that sometimes you're going to have to do things that aren't what's the word I want to say?
Comfortable,
popular.
There you
That's
go.
what I want to say.
Yeah.
So it's the guy, it's not the popular guy, it's the guy that gets stuff done, right? Yeah. And I think that when you look at it from that perspective, that's the challenge, right? One of the things, as much as people will bash on social media and a lot of what's going on with communication today and the way that everybody's going to YouTube to get their information, all that kind of stuff, whatever negatives that you want to draw from that, I think if nothing else, what's come from that is the transparency. And you referenced this before, the Gen Z, the millennials, they're looking for transparency. They're tired of things being masked behind some facade that
right.
Things are perfect or whatever. We already know they're not perfect, right? We've talked about it. We just avoided being honest with it. And I think that's, as a business owner, and again, I've used this reference, right? We talk about the path of a business. It never bottom left to top right, in this phenomenal straight line, right? It is a squiggly line. It's going back and forth and forwards and backwards. You feel like some days you're taking 3 steps forward and 2 steps back. Other days you 1 step forward and 5 steps back. And the next day you're doing 10 steps forward and 1 step back. It's just, it's ongoing. Like I said, it is a very challenging scenario. And I think that the not being able to not being transparent about that, not helping people understand how to manage through that, being that leader that can challenge their people and say, hey, look, it's not going to be perfect all the time. Things are going to be challenging. It's okay. We're going to learn from it and we're going to move forward.
Yeah.
Right. An accepting mentality that allows people to grow and learn from mistakes. I mean, that's what entrepreneurship is. Entrepreneurship, in my eyes, is literally the guy being a guy or gal who is confident enough in their own abilities to go out there knowing full well they're going to make mistakes and then wake up and do it again and wake up and do it again and keep coming at it until they figure out but they keep tweaking it. They don't keep running their head against the wall. They'll adjust it. They'll come a little bit differently next time, a little bit differently, but they just keep coming. Those are the people that find success.
Yeah.
The people, and it's funny because I had a conversation with somebody you and I both know, and he had mentioned that he had seen in an article or an interview with somebody, the gentleman made the comment that you're not going to find super smart people as entrepreneurs many times. And when I qualify that, doctors, lawyers, the smartest guys in the room, those are the guys that end up COOs and CFOs, and they do these professional roles and stuff like that. They shy away from entrepreneurship because it's not anywhere close to the same skill set, right? An entrepreneur knows a true entrepreneur knows they're not going to be right. They're going to keep coming at it until they figure it out. The person who's so conscious that they have to be right. Engineers, that's another example. Engineers, right? The science is so exacting. I can't afford to be wrong because if I'm wrong, the building will collapse.
Right.
And I could appreciate that. We respect that. We appreciate that. But that's not necessarily an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
An entrepreneur is going to be like, you know what? It's going to fail. It's going to struggle. I'm okay with it. I'll figure it out. I'll keep pushing. Yeah. And that's where I think a lot of people get stuck in that quandary is like, I got to be right. I got to be perfect. And I'm like, that's not the space. That's not the entrepreneurial space is a different space. But you can make it better by improving yourself and continue to look at yourself and say, where am I struggling? Where can I get better? And as you do that, you'll improve everybody around you, which only increases your odds of being successful.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that. I think just to kind of maybe bring it home, wrap it up, come full circle, whatever you want to say. If somebody's, watching this or they're listening to this and they recognize, hey, I have an owner mentality right now. I recognize that I need to be a leader or a better leader, or I need to improve this skill set of mine for my business to grow, for my team to succeed. What advice would you give them?
Well, as always, I would say get a coach. But the reality is, I mean, there's a lot of things you could do. One, pick up a book on leadership.
Yeah.
Lots of great books on leadership. John Maxwell's some of the ones that I originally started with. I would highly recommend any of his books on leadership. There's a number of them out there. Entre Leadership by Dave Ramsey was a really good book that I endorsed with my group. There's a lot of things that just reading in general is a huge step in the right direction about personal development, because I think that most of what you do in the personal development space is a lot of the same things that you'll have to go through to become an effective leader.
Yeah.
Right. You're going to have to be willing to challenge yourself. You're going to have to be willing to, address some of the things. Like, for instance, a good example, I've had conversations with owners before, and we're talking about, why they struggle with paying more money to certain roles within the organization. And, they look at it and say, well, I just don't think that they deserve that much. That's more than I want to pay myself. And I'm like, okay, so let me ask you this. If the business is doing, I don't know, $600,000 a year right now, and the majority of that is your efforts, and you're paying yourself, let's just say for the sake of argument, $100,000 a year. Yeah, it's a decent, you're doing okay for yourself. But you don't want to pay a salesperson, let's say $100,000, to grow the business from 600 to $1 million, right? Because get a 4-to-1 return ratio, that'd be a pretty good investment. You're not willing to pay that kind of money. And remember, you're not talking about paying them $100,000 salary necessarily. It's probably some kind of compensation model that's percentage, a certain amount of at risk. But you're not willing to do that because you can't justify it, because that's all you're paying yourself. That's so small-minded.
Yeah.
That's so short-sighted. If my business could double, and quite honestly, if it was done right, it would probably get a 6x return. You'd go from 600,000 to $1 million too, because now the owner can focus on high-level strategic decisions instead of focusing on selling clients.
Yeah.
That the owner can look at, can analyze last year's performance and recognize where the gaps were. They can start looking at delivery vehicles and opportunities and where are the gaps there. So, I think that the key there is to recognize, what's your highest, best use of value of time. And, if you can bring in a salesperson and pay them that kind of money, and they're going to make that kind of an impact. Now, you don't know that, right? You're taking a little bit of a risk, but like I said before, the whole thing is a risk. Yeah. So, you've got to do your due diligence, and you got to put some systems into place to ensure that you get the result you want. But at the end of the day, that's going to make a huge difference in your business. It goes back to the question you asked earlier. It's like, why do people struggle to, move the business along? It's because they won't take those calculated risks. They don't have the due diligence and the discipline to go through that process and create a process that will allow them to do that with the business. And I think that when people are saying, how can I get better? One, don't be afraid to take risks, right? Do go out and do some research, take some courses on, there's lots of stuff on leadership development. Like I said, not just books, but there's courses as well. I mean, for that matter, I know a lot of stuff I actually resonate really closely with is stuff that I learned in Management 101 in college in 1994.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's it was lead your team to allow them to find their own individual selves within the organization. That was one of the most primary things. I can tell you, it was my Management 101 course in NAU, and I think it was my second semester, my first year. And I remember very specifically, it was like, if you have a team, make sure it's a well-rounded team of different diverse people, right? Personalities, styles, whatever, and allow them to grow into the people they are. Make sure they have a good, clear vision of where you're going, but allow them to get there in their own way, and endorse that and reinforce that concept of allowing them to grow together, because you're going to gain perspectives that are going to allow you to take the business to the next level. It's just as simple as opening your mind and taking guidance from other people who have other perspectives. Even if you don't 100% agree with it, just listen to it, take what you like from it, and then formulate your own concepts on how to do that, and then test it. That's the other thing. Take it and test it. That's another big thing. Totally. Use it. See what works. See what doesn't work. As you see what works, then you can, especially for your leadership style, then you'll be able to endorse that and reinforce that, and you'll have certain things that you can hang your hat on and say, okay, this I know works.
Yeah. No, I love it. Great advice. I would also just shamelessly add, this is something that we do over at trainleadgrow.com.
Absolutely.
So if you are looking for leadership training for yourself as a small business owner, you're looking for executive coaching, or you're looking for leadership for training for leaders on your team. So we do first-time leaders, leading leaders. That's a whole nother skill set, right? So those are things we offer, and also a 360-degree leadership assessment, which is based off of our leadership model. So a lot of different options if that's something that you're struggling with, and we'd love to help you out, as I know Eric would over at mybizcoaches.co.
Absolutely. Yep.
So
Great
awesome.
process too, by the way.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, awesome. Well, hey, Eric, anything else that you want to add before we wrap up, or maybe anything that you want to share about My Biz Coaches?
It's right around the corner, David. I promise.
One of these days, man, we're going to get it out of you.
It's only been a quarter now.
It'll be
not quite. I think it's about 8 or 9 weeks.
Okay.
No, yeah, lots of good things coming. More and more. I mean, it's funny as as I'm talking about the process of an entrepreneur, the process, but the sequence of an entrepreneur, the ups and downs and the ebbs and flows, and each day I have new conversations with people that I'm like, wow, this is a game changer. The type of people I'm talking to, and the growth that we're having at My Biz Coaches, and people hear the show and they're like, oh, that was amazing. That particular guest was awesome. David's pretty cool too sometimes. But I say that to say, David, I know we've got some partnerships that we're working on as well, and there's a lot of great things coming. But the most important thing is as this company continues to grow, for me, the most important thing is making sure that we're having an impact, and moving those business owners from where they are to where they want to go. I can actually check off some of those businesses now that we've helped move to $1 million, and I'm beginning to tally those up, right, and keep track of those. And the success stories that we're hearing from our clients is going a long way. That's funny, because we're talking about the stories that you're fulfilling and everything. Recently had a new client come on a couple of months ago and already making some significant changes, right? Like I gave the guidance, and they went and they executed on it right away, right? And they're just knocking it out. And I'm like, oh, well, this is awesome. I wish all my clients would be that. I wish all my clients were that proactive. Exactly. Yeah. But and they're paying me kudos for all the support we're providing, and I'm like, you're the one doing the work. I'm ecstatic at how aggressive you are. So anyway, I just say that to say that I'm excited about where things are going, and this continues to evolve, and we're seeing more and more success stories. So excited about probably in the very near future here recruiting some more coaches too. So
yeah, you've got some great ones. I met a couple of your new coaches, and they're amazing. So if you guys haven't scheduled a free consultation with Eric or one of his coaches, check it out. They're awesome, great insight. Definitely recommend it.
Yep. Appreciate it, David.
Cool. Okay. Well, stay tuned. Eric's big announcements coming soon. I think it'll be worth it. So make sure you subscribe and check out upcoming episodes of the Biz Coach Show. And Eric, always great hanging out with you. Thanks for your time and insights today.
Awesome. Appreciate it, David. Always great hanging out.
See ya.
Yep.